But do you want to give us a quick 5 minutes about where MLA came from, how it got started, what made you feel like you needed to make this piece of software? Where did it all begin?
Back in 2007, I've always kind of had a hobby of writing software since I was a kid, and I also wrote stuff. When I worked at Verilight, I wrote a program called InstaChase, which worked with the artisan to build effects. And then there was Dr. Voller's show file health check, which used to repair artisan show files when people managed to screw them up. And I also wrote a very basic artisan to virtuoso conversion, can you see? So I've always had an interest in software. And during my time at Verilight, we developed a DMX MIDI controller, which had the nickname of Bernard. So anybody who was around Verilight those times will know of Bernard. And it was basically a little kind of suitcase lighting controller that looked like the artisan, used the artisan encoders and buttons and screens. And I developed the hardware and the software for that. So it was kind of test equipment ultimately. So I then started work on when I left Verilight in 2001, I then basically started the idea of maybe trying to write some test software. Maybe you could plug a DMX dongle into your laptop. So that's kind of where it started, was as DMX test software, which is completely very far removed from what it ultimately became. And as part of that, I kind of wanted to write like a rig database so that it would have profiles and patches and stuff like that. And I then decided, well, this has to be cross-platform. It can't, because I primarily write Mac OS. So I then started investigating cross-platform frameworks, and then I ended up settling on what at the time was called Real Basic. And then kind of started playing around with what is now the rig data side of MLA and the fixture profile side. So that was really where MLA kind of started. It will make more sense once we start talking about MLA. And then it really kind of came when I worked on Bombay Dreams in Broadway. We needed to do moving light tracking sheets for the data. And we would export data out of the HOG2, basically as a text file, and then bring it into Excel. And then you could kind of really roughly manipulate it to see the lists of what channel used what presets and all that kind of information. And I was kind of then playing around. I thought, well, I can probably import this into what I was doing. It's one of those typical kind of, you're writing something software and you go off at a tangent. And this tangent basically completely changed, the whole idea. It wasn't called Moving Light System, of course, at that point. And once I could import the data and format it within the application I was writing, it then started to become a logical progression to bring in other data. And, at the time, Focus Track was really kind of the predominant application used for documenting by Rob Halliday. I'm sure he'll talk about it. And I hadn't really even contemplated kind of trying to do something like that. And then it just started to become a natural progression. Once I was working with this console data, you kind of thought, well, it's quite easy to add a photograph to this data and whatever. And then that was really the birth kind of MLA. Then you start talking to a few people and they're saying, oh, it'd be really good if we could kind of do this. And I was talking to Chris Pye at the Royal Opera House when he was a programmer at the Opera House about how they were kind of workflowing and doing paperwork. And, in the end, I've now spoken to so many programmers from all over the world. I talked to a lot of programmers on Broadway as well as the West End. And, it just ended up kind of growing into something I didn't imagine it would be at all. And then in 2012 was when version 1 was kind of released. So, 2012 was a bit of a crazy year because I'd worked on the Olympics as a programmer. So I was slightly busy and also trying to release, my first version of a software application. And
burning the candle at both ends.
And, John McKernan has been a great support, because I've known John for quite a long time, and Ken as well. And I spoke to John, before I'd released it, long before MLA was even called MLA. I'd spoken to him about it, about his experiences, obviously with Lightwrite, about writing the industry application and distributing it. And he gave me, great advice. And, I showed him what I'd been up to. And, he told me how it worked with him, City Theatrical, and, the less successful relationships he'd had in the past. So in the end, I then kind of got in contact with Gary Fales and said, hey, I'm writing this. Would this be something you're interested? And yeah, he agreed.
Gary being City Theatrical man, just so people know at home.
Sorry, yes, Gary Fales is Mr. City Theatrical. And he decided to distribute it. So, and as a, to run alongside Light, because there is little areas of kind of overlap. And at that point, I kind of didn't develop quite so much the rig data side, because as we start to look at the application, you realize there's some overlap with Light in that kind of area. And it's become incredibly kind of successful for documenting shows. So, and
well, is this a good time to show us where the money is? Show us how it works.
Okay, well, I'll screen share and we'll see how well this goes. So MLA is a real application, cross-platform, ones on macOS and Windows. Produces documents, and a single document contains basically everything you need for your show. So it will contain all the photographs. So this is, I've just done new show. So if you launch MLA and do new show, you'll get this. If you're running the demo version, it will inform you before you create a new document that you're running in demo mode and the limitations. So it's a single document window. We basically have tabs across the top of the screen or the top of the window, which basically say, or the different areas of documentation you want to work with. So we have rig data, wheel loads. This is an empty show with nothing in at the moment. Preset documentation, queue list, console data, and then the reporting engine. So we'll start with the rig data. Essentially, the rig data is kind of very much like Light. There are some venues that don't use Light and use MLA for all their rig data documentation. Some shows don't use rig data at all. I'm sure you probably find if you look at any of the example MLA files in the Dropboxes that other people have provided, you might find there's no rig data at all. But sometimes it's kind of handy to have it documented in both. To add fixtures is pretty straightforward. You can just click on the Add Fixtures button, and then you enter a start channel, say how many you want. I want 10 copies. I'm not going to go through every single option in these screens because we'll be here for weeks. I say I want to put that onto LX1. Then you can choose from the fixture library that's built into MLA what fixture you want to apply. So I don't know, put some GLP impression X4Ls, and you can choose the DMX mode. We'll leave it in normal, just hit add. And that will then just add the fixtures into the rig data database. You can edit any of this information just by, if I kind of go, well, actually, I'm going to make channels 6 through 10. I want to put on LX2, so I can just put those on LX2. If I want to unit number them, I'm just kind of obviously not going to go into huge amounts of detail here. I can just go 1+, and it will auto increment to give them unit numbers. If I want to patch them, I can then just click on select all of them and hit patch and say I want to put those onto universe A1. You can use your universe identifiers can be A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. You can also do absolute addressing. You need to change an option in the preferences to enable that. You can also, within the preferences, change how your address is formatted to how you kind of see it. Now, I'm just going to add some, what I'm actually going to do is show you another way of adding fixtures. So I'm just going to delete these fixtures. So this is the manual way of adding fixtures, just using the Add Fixtures button. Now, if you're using Light, what I'm going to do is in the Dropbox, there is a LW export.txt file. So I'm just going to do File, Import Light text file. Now, this text file was exported from Light. There are some automated actions in the MLA installation that you can use to basically just export data out of Light. So I'll just open that, and that has now imported the data that I exported from Light. You can also do a similar thing. There is another example which we won't do, but simple rig data export.txt, which is in the Moving Light Assistant folder, and that was an export from Vectorworks. So what we're about to do is kind of similar for both things. I have included the original file. So there's the original Light file and the original Vectorworks file. The file you're looking for, it's not the Lightwrite file itself, it's lwexport.txt. It's in the Moving Light Assistant folder. Ella. Now, if you import information like I've done here, these are not linked up to the Moving Light Assistant fixture profiles. You can tell quite easily because it says it takes 0 DMX slots and has no DMX mode attached. I can change that quite quickly and easily. So I'll just have to, oh, yeah, good. Thanks, Ella. I'll just go to Manage Fixture Types. And here I can assign, basically, it's detected that there's a VO2000 spot. And it can then automatically work out which fixture profile within MLA it wants to use. You can change this to be whatever you want. And I just hit assign, and you can now see I'm going to use the DMX mode. So now when I click OK, you'll now see within here, it now knows how many DMX channels it takes and what the DMX modes are. MLA is also kind of intelligent. I'll just going to add some other fixtures. So I'll just add 5. You don't have to provide much of this information, but you do have to provide an instrument type. So I'm going to put some Verilight VL5s. Or maybe VL5, yeah, VL5. Quite an old school fixture. And here you'll see it knows about the lenses. So in the lenses, when I click on the edit, it knows what the different lens options are. So this is where MLA is more geared towards moving lights. The fixture profiles enable it to know much more about the fixtures. So I can say, well, I want those to have 10-row lenticulars in. What you can also document within MLA are the menu settings on the fixture. So if you just click on any of the cells on a row and just hit menu dip, it will then bring up the menu settings for that fixture. So for instance, if you know that your pan is reversed, you could then turn that on. You can now see it's indicating it's non-standard. So now you'll also find that if you have the fixture options row displayed, it says custom. You can change what rows are displayed by clicking on the columns. And these are all the possible columns you can display. And you can obviously, of course, drag them. So if I want to add fixture power, I can drag that over. And then if I want, I can maybe make that appear after the lens. And now you'll see the fixture power column is available. It's also quite easy if I kind of go, well, LX3 is exactly the same really as LX1. So what I can do is I don't even need to select them, is I can duplicate fixtures. And so I want to duplicate the position. I want to duplicate LX1. I want to call that LX3. The channel numbers are going to be offset. So they were 1 through 10. I'm going to make them 21. So I want to add 20 onto that. And I want to clear the patch. Otherwise, I'm going to end up with a patch over. Well, actually, I won't clear the patch, just so you see what happens. And we won't change the unit numbers. So you can see I now duplicated an entire position. It's now LX3, but now all these reds indicate I have basically overlapping DMX addresses, which you can see it says I have 20. So what I could do is just repatch these. So the easiest way is just hit patch and say change universe, and I'll stick it on universe B. And that now fixes the problem. So that's kind of just a very simple overview of the rig data kind of tab. So you can also build your rig data from the console data, which we'll talk about a little in a moment. When you import console data, you can import the patch, and then you could use the patch to update your rig data. Like as an example, if I do update, I can say update only the DMX addresses, so it doesn't mess up the rest of what you've got in rig data. Or you could build it from your patch. If you've got an empty rig data and you have the patch imported, you could just hit update from patch, and it would build at least a basic rig data for you. Pretty much if you do importing or update from patch and it's created fixtures, you will have to assign fixture types, MLA fixture types to them. You can also do it on an individual basis. If you select a like Build 2000 spot, I can in the edit box say change fixture type is another way of changing the fixture types if I wanted to make that a wash light, for example. So I'll make that a Build 2000 wash, hit OK, and that's now made that a wash. And you'll see, of course, everything's updated. It's now only takes 15 DMX slots. Its fixture power has changed and whatever. Now, connected to the rig data side are wheel loads. Now, because I've imported all these fixtures, there won't be any wheel loads in here. If you use add fixtures, you will find that the wheel loads, the default wheel loads will appear. So I'm just going to add a load, and I'm going to call it load A. And I'm going to, just because we've got Verilight Build 2000s, I'll just do the Build 2000 spot. And then it says it wants to copy the load from. Now, the fixture profiles basically can have multiple standard default loads based on where you are in the world. You may find that PRG Japan gives you a completely different standard load in their fixtures to PRG in the USA. So we'll just say I know that they have a PRG standard. So I can then click on the gobo and you'll see the gobo wheel appears. I can select which wheel I'm looking at. There is no wheel 3 for the wheel 2000. I can also look at the color wheel. There is an option to add the position numbers on. The fixture profile decides what starts as 0 or 1. But you can edit the fixture profiles. You can build your own fixture profiles for MLA, so you don't have to worry about that. So if I want to change a gobo, like I want to put stars, this is the gobo library on the right-hand side. You select the catalog from the top. Obviously, you might not have so much fun putting Martin gobos into a Verilight, but you might be able to. But we'll stay with the Verilight gobo library for a moment. There's my star. So I kind of go, well, I want to replace the water texture with stars. So I'm just dragging, clicking, and then dragging. And I'm just dropping. You'll see the red circle is where you're going to drop when you let go. So I'll just let go. And it's now put the stars gobo in there. You'll also see it's updated in the list on the left-hand side. It's now bold to indicate it's a non-standard gobo. You can, if you happen to know the catalog numbers, you can also just type them directly in. So if I do 7002, it's now changed to gobo and put the name in for you as Pebbles. So I'll just undo that. The application has a full undo redo system just in the edit menu, or it's Command Z on a Mac. I'm assuming it's Command Z on a Mac, and I assume it's Control Z on a Windows. If you drag gobo, so if I kind of go, well, actually, I want to move the waves gobo to be the first gobo, I can click and drag in this window, and you'll then see it readjusts the gobos on the wheel. And it will then make them italic, which indicates they're a standard gobo in a non-standard position. Control Z, thank you. I don't spend my life in Windows very much, unless I'm running an offline editor or whatever. Now, these graphics, I can just drag out of the application, drop them onto my desktop, and that is now a JPEG that you can use in your own paperwork. So you could then import that JPEG into Vectorworks if you're making your own kind of cheat sheets. You can use it however you want. You can also produce reports. In 1.32, there are specific wheel load reports that you can generate, which will give you the graphics and all the information. That doesn't exist at the moment in MLA 1.4. That's a work in progress because I'm rewriting the engine, reporting engine. I'm just trying to read somebody's comment. If options come up under copy load, that probably means the libraries are deleted, correct? The copy load, you have to have the load selected. So I've got load A selected. Now, I can do copy load. Probably if you don't have anything selected. Oh, no, that still works. You can produce reports on the rig data. So like we'll just do like there's a very basic instrument schedule kind of idea. So you can produce PDFs of the paperwork. If you do, Bridget, if you just add a load, it should come up with the standard load by default, and that's how it will generally appear. If you add fixtures, like I'll just add a fixture. Right, okay, just use Verilight. I guess, oh, TMB, no. I guess I use Verilight fixtures a lot for testing and stuff because I tend to know them quite well. I've added a 3500 myself, and I should find that 3500 standard load has automatically appeared. That's because I added a fixture manually that then kind of appears. So I could then maybe go, okay, now I want to create a load B from that. And then, you know, I can now work with my load B without affecting my standard load, if that makes any sense. So that's just kind of really kind of touching report generation report. So just go to report preview, and then from the report menu, you basically choose the report you want to build. So I'll build a rig data patch list, and now it builds the report for you. So that's me just touching really on the rig data side of MLA. There are other areas you can really delve into in terms of you can look at, well, we'll look at some of the other areas when we have a bigger show file. Now I'm going to load up a show file console data. Now there isn't an example show file desktop that you can directly follow along with. Where am I going? I won't go that one. So I'm just going to use the Mamma Mia show file as an example. To add your own fixtures, you go to Manage Fixture Profile Library, and then this is the Fixture Profile Library. You can select the different manufacturers. No, there's no Chauvet, I'm afraid, but you could add one. Just go New, and then call it whatever you want. You can then start filling in the various pieces of information, like its weight, electrical, all the DMX profile information, optical setups. Then you have the gobos, you say how many gobo wheels it has. Then creating the actual wheel graphics is a little bit fiddly. You need to know the size of the wheels and stuff. But if you don't supply wheel graphics, it will draw basic wheels for you automatically in the wheel loads. Okay, now this is the actual show file we use to refocus Mamma Mia. Because it takes so long to import, that's why I've not really supplied all the various pieces of data to import. So this is an MA2 show file that has been imported, and then we've added all the documentation to it. So if you look in the console data tab, you would normally then find the various pieces of information. You can kind of follow along with the Cake the Musical example, because you can open that. You just can't make any changes to it. And at least you'll see that there is data in there if you want to look at it. So you can see that we can look at the effect data. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail for time on much of this area of the application. I can look at the groups. If you're running MLA 1.3.2, the old version, you can do reports on groups. So you can print out group sheets quite easily. That will appear very shortly in MLA 1.4. You can see the patch data, which is exactly as it comes from the console. Preset data. So these are all for an MA, these are all the preset types. If you're running on an EOS, you'll see that there's obviously preset, and then there's focus palettes, color palettes, beam palettes. So I can expand, and this shows me all the presets. So I can click on downstage back. This shows me all the channels that's recorded in it. This show file is a huge mess because this is still has the LED rig and the old moving light rig still in there, which is why you see everything in the 9000s. I can click on a channel because it tells me that it's used. It tells me it's a selected preset. And then if I click on channel 4, it would then show me where it's used in the show and in which queue lists. So I can use this to actually analyze the data and see what's kind of going on. You may find if you, I can never remember. For example, here's some in the 31 beach focus. I can see that channels 13, 15, 16, 22, they don't use the preset. So that can be quite handy. I could, when I'm cleaning up a show file, I could go in and look and remove those. You can also look at presets by channel. So you can look like they're all presets for channel 1. I can also look at the channel data. So I can look at like a track sheet for a channel. It will take a moment. So this is all the cues for one channel. If it's kind of black text, it's a hard value. If it's gray text, it's a tracking value. You can do a certain amount of analysis. You can look for redundant moves, i.e. it's highlighting any moves where you may go somewhere, but the dimmer never opens. For example, you know, I seem to go to voulez-vous wash here, but I can see actually looking in the dimmer column, it's 0 before, it kind of goes into a mark, and then it goes into an effect. So that might be a redundant move. With much of this analysis, you always need to understand the context of the programming, because you may kind of be positioning lights so that they maybe turn on and sweep into place. So that would show up both as a live move and also a redundant move. So you always need to understand the context of your programming when you're looking at any of this kind of information. You shouldn't blindly be removing data. We can also then look at queues, and these show what happens queue by queue in the channels. This isn't a fully tracked view. So this isn't showing all channels and their tracked states. It's only showing the channels that change in that queue, which can be quite useful when you're really wanting to look through and see what's actually changing in a queue. We then have the queue list. So we can, it's basically, you can choose which queue list you're viewing of the console data, or this would, obviously this is a sequence in MA speak or a queue list in EOS speak. Again, you can change which columns are displayed, and some of them are quite specific based on the fixture, the console type that you're using. So you can basically add only Grand MA ones, Grand MA 2 ones, EOS ones, Hawk 2, Hawk 4, PRG V676. The data we can import at the moment, you can import data, I should say, from the EOS family of consoles, from MA1, MA2, the PRG V676 consoles, and from the Hawk 2. The Hawk 2 still has the legacy code that I originally wrote. Not that I guess many people are doing shows on Hawk 2s these days, or certainly doing new shows that they would want to document. So now we have here obviously the queue list. Now the data that's in here you cannot edit. You cannot edit information in the queue list. But what you can do is you can attach your own information to it. So for example, I can add my own notes to a queue over here on the right. I can say what act it's in, what scene it's in, name of the scene, and what set is on stage. And as you can also see, I can also add my own photograph. Now, the photographs, if you want, you can zoom, and it ends up with its own little floating window that you can drag around. And actually, this window, well, interesting thing going on there. It's kind of difficult to do when I'm zoomed in. I'll just maybe drag that over there a bit. You can see in the background, but as I select each queue, it does change to whatever queue I have selected. So that can be handy, especially if you're running in multi-screen setups. If you're connected to a console, dependent on how you're connected, MIDI show control is one option for the MA, or just OSC for the EOS, is you can have your queue list follow the console. So whatever queue the console is in, you will find it will show the relevant queue in MLA. Now, adding the photographs to the cues. Now, in terms of photographing these cue photographs, we can do this automatically. So you can connect cameras to MLA. I'm just going to turn my camera on, hopefully, and I will just connect my camera. Now, the supported cameras vary between platform. If you're on Mac OS, we support the Canon digital SLR ranges of cameras. Not the little pointy clicky ones, because they don't support what's called tethering. You'll tend to find any manufacturer of smaller pointy clicky cameras don't support tethering. I'm using a Nikon here, and I can actually use image capture in macOS to do this. I'm just going to connect to it. I don't know why it takes a moment. So now the session's open, and I can see that at the bottom my camera status is connected. On Windows, you can use the Canon digital SLRs. I've included the drivers for that. You can also use video cameras and video input devices like Blackmagic capture things by using either AV Foundation on macOS or Direct Show on Windows OS. Yes, you can connect an iPhone if you connected via USB. It appears in image capture, but you will not be able to remote control the iPhone. If you would actually have to take the picture on the iPhone and then get it to appear in MLA. Now I'm connected to the camera, so I should just be able to take a test photo, which is always a handy way to check you're working. And you're now going to get a side picture of me, so I know that I'm connected to a camera. So what I could do is I could take a cue photo by clicking on the photo thing, and it just automatically appears straight in MLA. GoPros, no, I don't think GoPros show up in image capture on macOS. I don't think they do, but if they do, I don't have a GoPro. But there are ways of also kind of interfacing with other software, which is kind of quite a complex topic. You can send events to other applications, so you may be able to use the camera's own control software. And you can then use what's called a watch folder, where basically anything that appears in the watch folder will then be brought automatically into MLA. Now, once you're connected to a camera, you could then basically turn on auto photograph. So then every time MLA is triggered, this won't actually happen in this setup I have here because I'm not connected to a console. But when it retrieves a go Q1, MLA will go to Q1, and then at the end of the time of the cue, it will then automatically take a photograph for you. So you can do this during a tech session or maybe a rehearsal. If you're using a video capture device, obviously there's no noise when it takes a photograph. So you could have it automatically just be on the circuit front and photograph a performance where it's just automatically taking all your cue photos for you. Just because I'm aware of time, I'm not going to dwell too long in this area. Now, when you're documenting a show, especially doing the presets, one of the good first things to do is actually in the cue list view, is to give each cue a set. So you know what set you want to be in. Now, you can do this in groups. You can just select a whole range of cues and go, I want to make this set my set. And that will then apply it to all the sets. Now, this becomes handy, as you'll see when we start looking at preset documentation. So normally when I've imported the console data, one of the first things I would recommend to do is go to the cue list and just block out all the sets in the show, so that it makes your life a bit easier when you're working in preset documentation. Now, this is a file that's already has all its presets kind of added. There's also all sorts of, we've got various dimmer presets that are added, which have no photos, but they just have information relating to that preset, so they know what that preset actually means in the console. And you will even find in here, we have the conventional focus is also in here. Now, I saw Tim's discussion about conventional focus, and I agree with him that I think focus charts are definitely the better way of going for reproducing a focus of a show. But having the photographs is handy, and you see all the focus notes have been put in here. So drawings have been put on top. Now, what I'm going to do is just show you, I'm just going to need my notes to remember which preset I'm recreating. There's two ways you can kind of basically document a preset. I'm going to, once you've got all your cue lists blocked out, so you've got all your sets set, I'm just going to add a preset. Now, you can either add one manually. We'll do this way, we'll add it manually, but you can, of course, add it from the console data. So I'd go to all presets. You might want to only list the undocumented presets or only list the used ones. There's no point in adding presets to preset documentation that are not used. You might have some work like focuses or something like that. Now, I'm going to do this manually. You can do this manually yourselves. So I'm just going to call this, it's all preset. When I've added that, that will appear at the bottom of my preset list. If I select it, I'll see it has no channels. I'm just going to add some channels. I'm doing this manually just so you can follow along because you don't have the console data. Of course, I could automatically add the channels from the console data. If I'll just demonstrate doing that. Oh, for some reason, it didn't. Maybe I missed something. It can't identify the preset. That's why I know why. Don't worry about that. It's because that should say 0.4. That's it. So that's adding directly from the console data. When you add presets normally, like when you're doing it from the console data, you always have the add channels checkbox enabled, so you don't have to do that two-step process. And generally, you might only want to add the used channels. It will look through the console data and basically only add channels that use a particular preset. Again, there's no point if you've got a load of lights that aren't used in the preset, them being documented. So I've got my preset. I'm actually going to remove all the channels. In fact, I can just do undo. And I'm just going to add them manually again because you could follow along this way. Make the fixture number the same as the channel number. This whole channel versus fixture is a very MA thing. And we'll just say that the fixture type is 2000. I'm going to add also another channel manually, 52. This should auto-complete your 2000 spot. You can automatically, if you have the console data imported, you can get it work out the fixture type automatically from the fixture patch. Again, I'm just doing it this way because you don't have any console data. I now have my 3 channels, so I can just add my own focus notes. So I know that channel 35 is on Sam. I know that 52 is on Bill. He's on Harry. Now I could manually bring in the photographs. Now what I'm going to do is, so I could click, and just like it does in Q Photos, it just brings them in straight away. I'm just going to delete that. What I'm actually going to do is add a Bootcamp. I'm going to bring in this Q photo. Where did that go? That's better. So I just imported a file directly off my hard drive in this case. Now I know that this is Q74. This is probably the best queue to focus this in. That's what a focus queue is. Now, normally the set should auto-populate. Now, I noticed this the other day. There you go. So it's automatically picked up the set from Q74, and it's got that from the queue list. So that's the reason for going into the queue list and blocking in all your settings, all your scenes. Now, one way of documenting, if you don't have time to actually have a specific documentation session, is actually just to draw on this photo. This is a queue photo. So if you manage to get all your queue photos done automatically, because that doesn't take any stage time, there's the original queue photo. You can copy photos from anywhere to anywhere within MLA, from queues to presets, presets to queues, presets, whatever. I could just directly draw in this photograph. So there's a very simple paint program. So I'm just going to draw in maybe orange. Now, I can get it to add the channels automatically because it knows that channels 35, 52, 54 in this preset. So I'm just going to get it to just automatically add some text for me that saves me having to do this later. So I know that that's going to be 54. I'm just clicking and dragging. And then if I wanted, I can also draw lines and stick arrows on the end. Now, when you draw something, oddly, you can assign a drawn object a channel number. So you'll see why this is. So that I know is channel 52. So I'm now going to draw another line for 35 and set that line to be in channel 35. You'll see why we do this in a moment. And draw that and make that 54. So now I hit done. So you see there's all my drawings. Now, what I can do is I can turn on highlight in the toolbar, and then whichever channel I have selected, you can see it highlights it in the photograph. I can, of course, zoom to make the picture bigger if I want, if I was running multi-screen, and it should all track because we're running in one screen, it's a bit fiddly. You can also hide others, so you only see the one that you have selected. So that is a quick and dirty way of doing moving light documentation where you don't have time to have a photograph session, but you did manage to get queue photographs. You can just draw on these. You can also draw on top of queues in the queue list as well. It has the same edit functionality.
That's fun, Andy. I didn't know about highlight. See, I'm learning new stuff.
You can, of course, change the highlight color. If you prefer a different color, highlight color. So that's the quick way. Now the better way of documenting. Delete that queue photo. I'm just going to bring in these photographs. All these photographs are in the Dropbox folder. So in preset photos, I'm going to add this first image that doesn't have a channel number attached to it. So typically, you'd have preset photos and channel photos. So your preset photos. Somebody's just crashed MLA. Because bug reporters come up. Preset photos. You tend to take basically all the lights on in that particular preset. So in this case, there's my three specials. Then channel photos will be specific to a channel. So I have channel 35 selected. If I now select channel to show me the channel photo, there isn't one. So now I'll just add the photograph. This time it's going to be channel 35. Now I'll see that this is the channel photograph. But it also tells me in the image column on the right in the channel list that it has a channel photo. So I can also do the same for 52. And I'll do this. I think I have preset common mistake. You can lock it in the photo mode. So I lock it in channel mode, so it stays in channel mode. What we do, 52, and then 54. I'll just knock that map. Now I've ended up with in my preset list. You have four photographs basically per item. Preset can have 4 photographs. Channels can each have 4 photographs. So obviously I added this by mistake, so I'll just remove that from there. So there I'm seeing my preset. Now if I click on any of the channels, I see the channel photograph for that. So this is pretty much how most people document. shows these days. So if I go, I have no idea to maybe trying to something. So you can see this is the preset called courtyard, and then I can see the individual components that make up that preset. Now, the taking of these photographs can be a time-consuming process. So the best way of doing it is to use scripts. Now, what scripts will do? You'll find there's a menu. Dependent on the console you have to use the right one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add. Actually, I'm going to delete the photographs just to demonstrate this automatically. Now I'm not connected to a console. What this script will do is it will tell the console what to do, bring up the channel, put it into the preset, and then once it's done all that, it will then take a photograph of it. So I have a preset. Now I'm going to run the script. We're not going to see the what the console does. We'll see what it does with the camera. So it's automatically. Now I'm going to take a photograph as a preset photograph. It will then select the first channel. Okay. So what you'll now see, there's three channel photographs taken automatically. If I look at the preset photograph, now it would obviously normally turn on all the lights, put them into preset, take the preset photograph. Once it's done that, it'll turn the lights off, turn on the first light. Then it will take the channel photograph and then work its way through. Now the advantage with scripts is with a little bit of computer experience, edit the scripts to tell the console or to change how you want it to work. They're just text files. So I'll just go to the EOS photo. And then within here, there's various options. It is the language is called Lua, the computer programming language. But you can go in there and change basically the way you bring up channels, whatever you do need to understand the script. But it gives the power to the user.
Yeah, the script functions are brilliant. I've seen people set up absolutely insane things to make the software do absolutely whatever you want it to do. But before we move into that, or actually break, Andy, is it worth just talking about a little bit of, now that we've seen how MLA works and documents the individual focuses of a system of lights, is it worth just talking about good practice? Like, I know some people will just set this up and let it just auto photograph and walk away. But from my experience, like, I certainly won't do that, because if you need a certain piece of scenery, you have to get that piece of scenery flown in, because if not, you need the light to hit the piece of scenery that it's lighting. Yeah. And also it's really important, as you were just showing us, like, it might be great to have a photo of all those fixtures on in that preset, or maybe bi-electric. It's really important to think about the person who's going to have to look at this photograph and digest it and figure out the intent behind it, because the intent is key. So like on 6, for example, we don't just have individual focuses of a Sharpie wash formation. It's the group formation and then an individual focus of each. But that's so that it's important to show people that group photo, Yes. Or even we'll do several group photos and break it down by electric, right? So please don't think that you can just hit go on the software and walk away for 2 hours and come back and all your work is done.
Oh, no, definitely not. No, that's why the default setup of MLA is you have to select each preset in turn and then run the script. And the idea is to keep people engaged in the process, because as you can see, like all these photographs, there's a certain amount of work light on, and actually you have to adjust it sometimes because some lights are brighter than others. You need to make sure it's actually taking useful photographs, because nobody enjoys doing photo documentation. So, they want it to be as easy as possible. So, if you're a bit clever, you can actually adjust the script so that it does just step through your entire preset list and photograph it all for you. But I haven't provided you with that functionality directly myself out of the box, because I don't believe that's the right approach. I think you're much better to select a preset, run the script to take the photographs to make sure that the photographs are useful and they tell the right story, and put everything into kind of context.
Yeah, for sure. I'll like auto trigger the camera to get the photo into MLA, but me and a programmer will sit there and decide what we want the photograph to look like. What's the best way to communicate this particular focus?
Yeah.
I think that's really key. Andy, thank you so much for, I'm sure there's so much more you want to share with Moving Light Assistant. And if you have time this evening, do you want to come back and maybe answer some more questions?
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure we've not even touched a bit. So if I set up a session for 6:30 tonight, Andy, would you be free for that?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing your MA Mamma Mia tells with us, and it's been fascinating hearing about how the programmer and associate role works, and of course showing us your beautiful software that you've made. Guys, come back at 6:30. I'll set up a session for Andy, and you can ask questions. Anything else? Any final words you want to say, Andy?
No, I certainly, I'm watching yesterday. It seems like, I think it's a really good course, and I think there's so many interesting things even I've learned listening to other people talk about stuff. So, because nobody knows everything. So I think the more people share information, I think it's a great thing that everybody can learn from it. So, well, thank you everybody for coming along.
Thank you, and thank you, Andy, for sharing your time with us today. And we'll set up that session for 6:30 so anyone can ask you more questions, or you can do more demos into the wee hours of the night if you like.